The soft glow of my laptop illuminated my face as I stared at the text message. My finger hovered over the screen, trembling slightly as I read it again. Your sister's wedding is the family's priority. We can't make it to yours. My breath caught in my throat as the room suddenly felt 20 degrees colder. The handwritten wedding invitations I'd spent weeks perfecting lay scattered across the kitchen table, the gold wax seals catching the light. The carefully penned names of my parents now seemed to mock me from the cream-colored envelopes. My name is Rebecca, I'm 32 and a logistics specialist. This is the story of how I rebuilt a family that actually showed up. For a moment I couldn't move. The words on the screen blurred as I tried to process what they meant. My own mother had just chosen my sister Valerie's wedding over mine, both happening on the same weekend, thousands of miles apart. My wedding had been planned for months. Valerie had scheduled hers last minute, knowing the date conflict. Yet somehow, I was the one expected to understand. To bend. To disappear as I always had. I set my phone down with deliberate care, as if handling something explosive. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence of my apartment as I moved to the window, watching streetlights flicker on outside. The weight of a lifetime of similar moments pressed against my chest, science fair ribbons that went unnoticed, graduations where I sat alone, birthday dinners where conversation inevitably turned to Valerie's latest achievement. Growing up in our house meant watching the spotlight always find my sister while I remained in shadow. Not in cruel, obvious ways, my parents weren't monsters, but in the quiet pattern of 1,000 small moments. The trimmed family photos where my face disappeared at the edge of the frame. The school events where they arrived late and left early. The constant refrain, "You're lucky, Rebecca. Things come easier for you." Lucky. That word had always cut deeper than they knew. It dismissed every hour of work, every sacrifice, every achievement as mere happenstance. Luck implied no effort, no struggle, no recognition. Grandma Caroline was the only one who saw through it. She'd slip her arm around my shoulders during family gatherings and whisper, "They see what glitters. You're building something stronger than shine." My cousin Olivia understood too. She was the one who remembered my birthdays when everyone else was busy planning Valerie's summer pool party. But decades of being overlooked don't explode into confrontation. They settle into resignation, into a silence that feels safer than speaking up. So I had learned to expect less, to need less, to become the reasonable one. The flexible one. The one who understood. Until tonight. Staring at my mother's message, something shifted inside me. A quiet resolve crystallized where hurt had been. For once, I didn't respond with immediate understanding. I didn't apologize for having needs. I simply typed "that's fine" and set my phone aside. 2 days later, Valerie called. Her voice carried that sugary excitement I'd come to recognize as the prelude to another request for accommodation. "Can you believe it? The venue we wanted opened up last minute. It's the same weekend as yours, but that's fine, right? You on the West Coast. We're in Boston. It's destiny." Destiny. The word hung between us like a challenge. For a few seconds I couldn't speak. I just listened to the faint jingle of her bracelets through the phone and realized she was waiting for my congratulations. "That's great, Valerie," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Really? Perfect timing." She giggled. "I knew you'd understand. You've always been so reasonable." Reasonable. My assigned role in our family script. The steady one. The mature one. The predictable one who would always bend so others could remain comfortable. The next evening, my mother called. Her voice carried that careful tone she used when she was about to disappoint me but didn't want to feel guilty about it. "Sweetie," she began, "about the wedding dates. Valerie's fiancé's family can only do that weekend. She's very emotional right now, and it would mean so much if you could be flexible." Flexible. Another word that had defined my existence. "So you want me to move my wedding?" I asked quietly. Mom hesitated. "We just think it would be easier for everyone. You're so independent, Rebecca. You'll understand." The irony almost made me laugh. Easier for them. For Valerie. Not once did she ask what it would cost me. "Mom," I said slowly, "you promised you'd be there." She sighed, long and weary, as if I were the unreasonable one. "It's not about choosing sides. It's just logistics." That word, logistics, hit harder than I expected. It was my entire career, the field I'd built my company around. Logistics meant precision, integrity, fairness. But in my family's dictionary, it was just another excuse for betrayal. That night, I called my father. He answered with his usual calm, practical tone. "Becca, you know how your sister gets. If we don't go, she'll take it personally. You've always been the strong one." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. "So you're saying it's my job to understand?" Again. He didn't answer. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. For a long time I just sat in the dark. The only sounds were the clock ticking past midnight and my shallow breathing. The diamond on my engagement ring caught the moonlight through the window, casting tiny rainbows across the wall, fragments of a dream I'd been trying to force into a reality where I didn't fit. That's when it clicked. My family wasn't cruel in loud, obvious ways. Their weapon was omission, leaving me out of pictures, out of conversations, out of priority lists. I'd been trained to interpret silence as love. Not this time. I opened my laptop, navigated to a travel bookmark I'd saved months ago, and clicked on a listing for a stone villa in Tuscany surrounded by olive groves. The photos glowed like a dream, gold light on terracotta walls, ancient stone pathways winding through trees that had witnessed centuries of stories. If they wouldn't show up for me, I'd build something they could never ignore. The next morning, I booked a flight to Italy. No announcement, no family group chat, no dramatic goodbye. Just a single decision made in silence. When the plane descended over the hills of Tuscany, the light was different, softer, almost forgiving. I rented a small car and drove through winding roads lined with cypress trees until I reached the villa I'd only seen in pictures. It was older than I'd imagined. Stone walls the color of honey, wooden shutters cracked with age, olive trees stretching beyond the horizon. The caretaker, an older man named Signor Martini, handed me a ring of heavy iron keys and said in careful English, "This place waits for someone who sees it." For the first time in months, I felt seen. Inside, the air smelled of earth and dust, like a place that remembered every voice that had ever echoed through it. As I walked from room to room, I realized this wasn't just a house. It was a blank canvas. A chance to rebuild my story without anyone editing me out. Over the next weeks, I poured myself into restoring it. I hired local craftsmen who treated every beam and brick as if it were sacred. The sound of hammers and laughter mixed with the hum of cicadas. Every evening I'd sit on the terrace with a notebook, sketching plans for the wedding, one long stone table under a canopy of vines, strings of lanterns overhead. No family table, no seating hierarchy, just one place for everyone who chose to be there. The locals started calling me La Signora Silenziosa, the quiet lady. I liked that. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. When I called my fiancé and told him my plan, he didn't question it. He just said, "If this is what peace looks like for you, I'm in." And for the first time in my life, I believed someone meant it. A week later, I began sending out new invitations. Not the embossed gold kind I'd sent before, but simple cream envelopes with olive leaves pressed inside. Handwritten, personal, sincere. The first went to Olivia, my cousin who'd never forgotten my birthday. Then to Grandma Caroline, who had always seen through the family's illusions. And one by one, replies started coming in. Olivia called me first. "We heard what happened. Aunt Diana told everyone Valerie's wedding was the main event. We are done pretending. Send us the details. We'll be there." Her voice cracked halfway through, not from pity, but from loyalty. By the end of the week, flights were booked. Grandma messaged, "I've missed enough real love in my life. I'll be in Tuscany, my dear." The group chat they started called itself, The Real Family Table. Photos of passports, suitcases, and laughing emojis filled my phone. For the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen. And somewhere between the olive trees and the smell of fresh plaster, I realized this wasn't revenge. This was revelation. The morning of both weddings arrived under the same sun, two worlds unfolding miles apart. In Boston, the air was heavy with humidity and nerves. The hotel ballroom glimmered under chandeliers, but there was an uneasiness that even the florist couldn't hide. Half the chairs near the front sat empty. Mom stood by the entrance in her lavender dress, smiling too wide, pretending not to notice how many familiar faces were missing. Dad checked his watch, then his phone, then the door again. Maybe the flights got delayed, Mom whispered, her voice brittle. But no one was coming. Inside, Valerie adjusted her veil for the 5th time. Her bridesmaids hovered, whispering, "Where's Grandma? Didn't she always sit in the first row?" Valerie's smile wavered. "She must be running late," she said, but her voice cracked. The photographer shifted awkwardly, repositioning the guests to make the room look fuller. "Maybe move everyone forward," he suggested gently. "Sure," Valerie said, forcing a laugh, but her hand trembled as she clutched her bouquet. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the same sunlight poured over rolling hills of Tuscany, catching on silver olive leaves. The villa glowed like a painting, stone walls wrapped in vines, lanterns swaying in the breeze. The long table was set beneath the grape canopy, lined with candles, wildflowers, and clay plates handmade by local artisans. Olivia's children chased each other between the trees. Ryan, my fiancé, strummed his guitar, softly testing the chords of our song. Grandma Caroline sat in the front row, holding a small olive branch she'd plucked that morning, a symbol of peace, she said. I stood inside, looking out through the open doorway. My wedding gown wasn't grand or glittering, just silk, simple and soft, catching the afternoon light. Lucia, the local chef who had become a friend, pinned a sprig of olive leaves into my hair and whispered, "For good fortune and for truth." When I stepped outside, the breeze lifted the veil from my shoulders. The guests turned, faces glowing in the golden light. Grandma rose first, her eyes bright. "There she is," she said softly, and for the first time I believed her. There was no orchestra, no choreography, just Ryan's guitar, the rustle of vines, and the sound of people who had chosen to be there. As I walked down the aisle, I thought about every empty chair that had once represented absence, birthdays, forgotten graduations, unattended achievements, silences mistaken for peace. But here, every seat was filled. Every gaze met mine, unflinching. The officiant, a local friend of Lucia's, spoke in melodic English. "Love is not measured by how many are invited, but by who shows up." The words sank deep. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't read from paper. My vows came out like breath. "To the ones who show up," I began, my voice steady. "This love is for you. For those who believed in me before I ever proved I was enough. For the ones who stayed when it wasn't convenient." Olivia wiped her eyes. Grandma nodded slowly, whispering, "That's my girl." When the ceremony ended, applause rose, not loud but warm, human, alive. The courtyard filled with laughter and the smell of truffle butter and rosemary. Lucia's kitchen doors swung open, carrying platters of handmade pasta and roasted vegetables. The lanterns above flickered on as the sky turned violet. It wasn't perfect. It was real. Halfway through dinner, Olivia showed me her phone. "They're talking about it already," she said, half laughing. Photos had begun circulating through the family group chats, candles, the villa, the table glowing under the grapevines, Grandma laughing with Ryan's arm around her shoulder. Within hours, the images reached Boston. At the ballroom, Valerie was posing for her couple's portrait when one of the bridesmaids gasped, scrolling through her phone. "Wait, isn't that your family? They're in Italy." "What?" Valerie frowned, snatching the phone. On the screen was a photo of me and my husband standing beneath the Tuscan sky, lanterns glowing behind us, our family smiling around the table. Grandma holding up her olive branch. Olivia's kids throwing petals. Valerie froze. The photographer hesitated, lowering his camera. Around her, the murmur started soft at first, then spreading. "Isn't that Aunt Marjorie and Uncle Paul? I thought they were supposed to be here." Mom leaned over Dad's shoulder, eyes narrowing at the phone. "What is this?" she whispered. Dad's face drained of color. "It's Rebecca's wedding." Valerie's breath hitched. They went to hers. Mom didn't answer. The silence stretched, louder than any outburst could have been. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. The band played on, trying to fill the tension, but even the music sounded hollow. When the officiant toasted to family unity, no one raised a glass. Back in Tuscany, laughter rippled through the courtyard as Lucia poured wine into glasses and said, "Eat, drink, and remember why you came." Grandma leaned across the table and took my hand. "I've waited a long time to see this, Rebecca," she said. "This is what family was supposed to look like." The night deepened into gold and violet. Someone started a slow song and guests began to dance barefoot on the stone floor. For a moment I stepped away, walking toward the olive grove. The air smelled of wood smoke and lavender. The villa behind me glowed with life. My phone buzzed on the table, messages, missed calls, unread voicemails. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. In Boston, Mom's voice trembled as she called again, this time leaving a message. "Rebecca, how could you do this to us? Everyone's talking about it." We looked like fools. I listened to it the next morning, sipping coffee under the same olive tree where I'd said my vows. The sun was rising, turning the hills amber. I hit play once more, then deleted it. They thought humiliation was the punishment. It wasn't. The real consequence was realizing that I had moved on without needing their permission. The photos kept circulating online, shared by cousins, reposted by friends. The image of Grandma raising her olive branch became the quiet symbol of our reunion. No captions, no explanations, just truth. For years, they had cropped me out of their pictures. This time, I didn't need to fight for space in theirs. I had built my own frame and filled it with light. The week after the weddings, Tuscany fell quiet again. The lanterns were taken down. The laughter faded into memory, but the air still held the warmth of what we'd built. The long table stood empty now, scattered with dried petals and wine stains, proof that something real had happened there. One morning, as I was packing away the last of the decorations, my phone rang. "Mum." For a moment, I almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside me said, "Answer, not for them, for yourself." Her voice was shaky, defensive. "Rebecca, do you have any idea how embarrassed we were? Everyone at Valerie's wedding was talking about your little event in Italy. You made us look heartless." I took a slow breath, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. "I didn't make you look any way, Mom," I said evenly. "I just gave people a chance to see the truth." There was silence on the line, then a trembling sigh. "You've always been so cold." "We were just trying to keep peace." Before I could reply, another voice came through, Grandma's. "Diana, that's enough," she said, firm but calm. "You spent years asking this girl to shrink herself for your comfort. Now she finally stood tall, and you're calling it cruelty? No, my dear. That's freedom." Mom said nothing after that. The call ended quietly, like a door closing without a slam. I stepped outside, the olive trees swaying gently in the breeze. Lucia came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Everything okay?" I smiled faintly. "Better than okay. It's finally quiet in all the right ways." She looked toward the long table and said softly, "Then eat, Signora. You've earned peace." That evening, I set one last plate at the head of the table, the seat that had always been empty. I tied a small olive green ribbon around the chair and whispered, "For the girl who once waited to be chosen." The wind moved through the vines like a gentle sigh, and for the first time I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. Later, as the sun disappeared behind the hills, I poured a glass of wine and thought of Grandma's words, "Love isn't management, it's showing up." She was right. You don't need to fight for a seat at someone else's table. Build your own, and the right people will find their way to it.